I'd like to welcome Stuart back to his chair. He's shifted along. And welcome Steve Cox, CEO of Destination New South Wales, the New South Wales Government's tourism and major events agency, who's up for a chat. Steve is a passionate and energetic champion for Sydney and regional New South Wales. He drives the strategic direction of DNSW, including the delivery of the New South Wales Visitor Economy Strategy 2030 to ensure New South Wales is the premier visitor economy of the Asia Pacific by 2030. Asia Pacific. Welcome, Steve, and congratulations to you and your team for the biggest Vivid on record last year. What will 24 bring?
Over the question for you, Richard. Okay. I thought it was going to come from here.
No, well, we might pick up with events as we go through the conversation. Yeah. But we've just heard from the people delivering the infrastructure. You're the marketing and events guy, leading the marketing and events agency for the New South Wales Government. Yep. You and I know each other, but why don't you tell a few people in the room a little bit about your role, what DNSW is tasked to do with the government, so we can start to get a bit of a sense for what that is and maybe even demystify it for a few of the people that haven't had this conversation before.
Of course. Well, good morning, everyone. How good's this? I mean, it's absolutely fantastic to be here in this incredible centre talking about what we should all be talking about, which is the growth of the visitor economy, which is going to be turbocharged by Western Sydney. So my role at Destination New South Wales, as Stuart's mentioned, it's a government agency. It is purpose in life is to deliver economic and social benefit for the people in New South Wales by growing the visitor economy. So everything that we do is focused on that. We speak very much about the visitor economy intentionally, not about tourism. Not to say tourism is not important. Of course, it's important, but it is business events, it's students, it's the broader visitor economy and the impacts of the broader visitor economy. And the visitor economy in New South Wales, and I'll come to the numbers in a second, is very significant. And I'll give you those numbers in one moment. Organisationally, that's what we do. We want to be the premier visitor economy of the Asia Pacific. Again, this is not about beating Melbourne or Brisbane or others. That's just a given. It is about being the best in the Asia Pacific region and really focusing our energies and efforts on assuring that we are seen as that and valued as that by visitors. Organisationally, marketing team is there to drive awareness, get people to come here, visit, spend more, and really importantly, keep coming back. And I think that's an important part of the narrative today. Reasons to continue to visit Sydney, a bit like the great cities of the world. You want to keep going back. Western Sydney is a big part of that. Our events team is the major events agency, so we deliver everything to do with Vivid, which did have 3.5 million people last year, but then we work with event owners to deliver other events, such as South by Southwest or the Grand Finals or whatever it might be. And then we have a really important part of our organisation, which is actually our product and development team, and some of them are sitting in the back of the room. This is about working with industry at the local level, helping them get their product ready to be international sale ready, helping introduce them to buyers and sellers, running for mills. Last week, maybe the week before, we had 34 buyers out from India, which is a really big growth market for us, visiting operators here in Sydney as well as surrounding areas, Blue Mountains and surrounding areas in the Hunter Valley and others. So that's another important part of what we do. And then, of course, advocacy within government policy, those kinds of things.
So we had a little detour called COVID. We try to park it in the back of the brain. It's an experience, we learnt from it. But how are we going now? How have we recovered? Where do we sit as a state? What's the macro conditions for the performance of tourism?
Look, we've recovered really, really well, and very positively. And look, we recognise that's not necessarily every single business within the state, but overall, the visitor economy in New South Wales at the end of the last calendar year, 2023, for the very first time, has clicked above 50 billion. It's now $50.3 billion to the visitor economy. So pre-pandemic, it was about 42.6 thereabouts. So circa 15 or so % growth in the visitor economy, which is an outstanding result. When we set the strategy originally, we wanted to be back at 2019 levels by 2024. We're well ahead of that. We've extended beyond that. International, whatever is it, 11 billion? We are the fastest returning international market by value of any state within Australia. And certainly the number one state in Australia in total numbers. Here in Western Sydney, hot off the press, because I was pushing to get this number, because I could only get 4-year averages before I came into the room, but I was like going, give me a number, give me a number, give me a number. 5.3 billion. So 5.8 billion for Central River, Western Parkland City combined in the calendar year last year. So just over 10% of the, or around about 10% of the total pie. Very, very well. Good numbers. Regional has been outperforming Sydney, but those two lines are about to switch over again as Sydney, which was most heavily impacted through the pandemic, comes back. I think for me, the message I want everyone to take away, we've grown on average for the state in the visitor economy over the last decade, including the downturn of COVID, at a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of 6.4%. The opportunity, and I think the overall economy is 4 point something. So this is a growth sector for the New South Wales economy. We heard before, I think it's 1 in 10 or 1 in 12 jobs. It's 7% of total growth state product. It has the opportunity to grow beyond that. And we should be seeing it as absolutely as a growth sector, and it will be turbocharged by the airport and by the growth in Western Sydney over the coming decades. If you took that 5.3 billion in Western Sydney and you took it at a 6.4% CAGR to, say, 2035, the numbers now off the top of my head, they're around about 11.1 billion, I think it becomes over the next decade. But if we get it up to 10%, it's 16 billion. If you can get it up to 15%, it's about 28 billion. So there is really significant opportunity for growth right here in Western Sydney.
So the conditions are good for investment, and the long-term trajectory says you should be able to invest in confidence. Yep. However, to get to some of those overall targets, and you've got a 2030 strategy, I think the government's announced that it's going to revisit and update those numbers. If Western Sydney makes up, say, 30% of the state population and is only making up about 10% of the visitor economy spend, do we look at that as an opportunity? Do we go, this is a market that's got a lot more growth in it?
It's a huge opportunity.
And then how does DNSW work with operators, inbound, local governments? How are you thinking about placing DNSW in Western Sydney to capture that opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, the answer is very much, it's a very significant opportunity, clearly. One of the things that's held back New South Wales in the past has been the capacity of Sydney Airport. And everything that Simon said earlier on about the capacity of the new Western Sydney Airport is a fundamental game changer. You can't grow and this is where the big growth numbers are really, is the international market over time. In the international market, we are truly the lucky country on every single measure, also because we're in the Asia-Pacific region, and we have India on our doorstep, China as well, and let's not forget about Indonesia, which I think is forecast to be in the top 5 global economies by about 2030 or 2050, over the longer term. So we are absolutely incredibly well poised to get that growth. And the game changer of the Western Sydney Airport, no curfews, starting at sort of 5 to 10 million passenger movements, I think going up to 68 or 85 million over time, is very, very significant. So our role within that is, as we said, we've got the visitor economy strategy, which is a government strategy for the entire sector. We utilise that to then work into destination management plans more at the local level. When we first wrote the visitor economy strategy, we said that at the end of year 3 we'd do a review. We're doing a review now. You'll hear, or everyone who's related to this industry will hear a lot about that in the coming weeks. We'll be coming out for consultations, written submissions, roundtables, all those kind of pieces around how we then get the growth that we can envisage there. So we've got an important role to play between and working with government and with all of the stakeholders. We've established groups that work in the Western Parkland City, Central River City, and Eastern Harbour City, my apologies. We've got groups that are now established with local councils, and we have visitor economy sessions on a regular basis to review the work that's being done.
We're 2 and a bit years out from having an airport that could deliver as many as 10 million people in its first year. Even if you don't go anywhere near that capacity, you're talking about literally millions of more people flying in and out of Western Sydney. You make your way around the state, you talk to lots of different businesses, you speak at events like this. Do you think Western Sydney is really ready? Do you think it's got itself in the right mindset to take full advantage of the decisions that have already been made around infrastructure?
I don't think we're in the right mindset yet. I think events like this are incredibly important in that. I think there's many people that are there, and and that's not being critical across the board. But overall, if you look at, we've been talking a lot about how do we work to incentivise growth within the sectors and property and hotels and things like that. I think we sold something like 8.6 million tickets to the Olympic Games, and you think about all that hype that went into the Olympics just before you went to, but you've got an airport that's about to deliver up to 10 million passenger movements in its first couple of years. You kind of go, right, okay, we've got some real opportunity there. So I think there's lots of great work happening, there's lots of opportunity happening, but I do think that for everybody, industry as a whole, we've got to really open our eyes and go, there is this enormous opportunity here. It is, as the numbers said before, already bigger than Adelaide, already bigger than Brisbane, fastest growing economy in Australia. You've got this incredible infrastructure investments that are going to transform all that connectivity. So I think the answer, Stuart, is there's lots of good work happening, but if we're going to get full advantage of it, I think we've all got to continue to double down, and industry's got a really important role to play in that.
I want to ask you a question about events in Western Sydney. A big part of the budget that you are responsible for is about funding events. Mm-hmm. What's holding Western Sydney back from being able to host more events? What are the things that are missing? Where does Steve Cox go, geez, I wish that thing was in Western Sydney, because if it existed, I'd be able to go out and either create that event or buy that event from overseas and bring it to Western Sydney. But because something's missing, where are the gaps in your head?
Look, I think first and foremost, we've got to recognise some of the successes that are already here already. I mean, we've delivered just in the Destination New South Wales invested in events in the last financial year, over $200 million worth of visitor spend in Western Sydney. It was $90 million the year before. There are some fantastic assets. You talk to different people, but Homebush is part of Western Sydney. It's an incredible asset that is there, and there's more that we can do to utilise that. There's talk at the moment of roofs and things like that, which I think would be a terrific piece. You and I both know we've tried to put some very big events in Western Sydney over the period of time, which we weren't able to pull together. I think it's evolving and it's building. At the end of the day, if you look at the big events that we put on, they require generally large population areas, stadiums. So we've got Combank Stadium, more stadium upgrades, big convention centres. So this is terrific, but large-scale convention centres to drive business events and other related events so that you can drive those. So I think convention centre over time, more infrastructure investment over the period, outdoor stages, those kind of things. It's about making sure that we've got those big spaces to go, right, we want to put a Fred Again concert in Parramatta. Where are we going to put it? How do we drop it down? Can we get that in and bump that out? We're going to put a big major business event in. Which convention centres? Where do we drop that in? Where do we drop that out? And then which stadia have we got available? They're the big pieces, I guess. And then the connectivity to be able to move the people in and out. I mean, we looked at one very big event for Western Sydney, as you know, and trying to get the people in and out was a big part of that. So, those metro connections and the airport connections will be fundamental to that visitor experience, because the events that are working well and will continue to work well are those that put the visitor at the centre of what they do and give them an incredible experience, and that needs to be everything from being at the event, but where they're staying. So you need better accommodation, you need to be able to get people to stay at, I think there's, one 5-star, but there's more coming. So there's really not enough 5-star hotels and 4-star and higher quality accommodation levels. We need more rooms in Western Sydney. I mean, if you drop a big event in, you've got to be able to accommodate everybody. So we just need more investment in the infrastructure that relates more broadly, both the event infrastructure, but all the supporting infrastructure as well.
And that's a drawdown, or even a call to arms, if I was going to use that phrase, to the private sector.
Oh, 100%.
It's the private sector that's going to be delivering some of that softer infrastructure, the accommodation infrastructure. And your message to them is there's confidence to do that?
Oh, very much so. I mean, look, it's grown. You look at the numbers, 6.4% over the decade, including the pandemic. New South Wales has a $15.1 billion deficit with the rest of the world. There's 8 million of us. We're spending $15.1 billion more travelling overseas than the entire planet spends coming here every single year, which is insanity. So why? Because connectivity. Why? Because we've had a curfewed airport that hasn't had that volume. Now we are building a state. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Not only has it the first one in 50 years, but it truly is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. So I've got to beat the drum within government to get everyone focused as well, and there's lots of good work happening, but make sure everyone's there. But be clear, this is about private sector, looking at the opportunities that are there, and then working with us. What I want to hear when we do the visitor economy review is, what are the barriers? What are the incentives? What can we do to accelerate? Because it will come eventually, but we want it to happen now. And a bit like we just spoke about, first time we've got a metro that's going through before the city's been built. We should be building the capacity and the centres now, because the freight train is coming. But let's not wait till it gets here before we start putting them on the ground. Let's go, okay, let's take this area really seriously and realise that people are going to want to come here, and then next time they come to Sydney, they might go and have a look at the bridge and the Opera House, but they're going to want to come here first and go to the Blue Mountains and go to the other things that are around this area.
It's a great way to frame the future of this discussion. We're a nation that's about 27 million people that spends more money travelling overseas than a globe of 6 billion.
15.1 billion more in New South Wales alone.
Coming to New South Wales or Australia.
Look at the India market, bigger than China, faster growing than China, smaller economy today, 488 million. One of the growth markets right now for us, it's up on where it was previously. China, 4.8 billion. Just one, there's one small example. Just get India right, the second largest diaspora, the fastest growing diaspora in the state. I mean, that market alone can deliver a big chunk of it. But then you've got Indonesia. Indonesia in the last year is 160% up on where it was. It's now a $370 million market for us, just like that. I mean, the opportunity's big.
So we're building a giant new door called Western Sydney Airport. It's right on our doorstep.
Yes.
We're going to put up a "We're open for business" sign.
Absolutely.
And DNSW is going to be there to help people along the way.
Very, very much so.
Been great to have you here, Steve.
And then let's look after them and treat them as guests and get them to keep coming back.
Fantastic.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Fantastic. Don't you feel pumped up? So much positivity and optimism, and some compelling data there, that deficit. The other way to do that is to stop people leaving the country, Steve, and that could redress that deficit. But I like the idea of people coming in. The Indians, the Indonesians, and many others coming from Southeast Asia. So thank you for those strategic insights and for the support that DNSW provides to the industry, driving programs and promotions.